Hello, everyone. I'm Kyle Helstowski, and I'm a student for Art 104. And today I will be interviewing Benny. So the first question is, please introduce yourself.
Okay, hi, I'm Benny Lichtner. I'm a new media artist originally from Santa Fe, New Mexico, and now I live in Berlin. And I work on New Art City, and I helped co-found New Art City.
Second question, what is the earliest memory you have of working with art and or technology?
Earliest memory I have working with art and technology, I think it might be when you had to have like a graphing calculator in school. And then it turned out you could like program those. I don't remember what the language was. I had never programmed anything before, but you could make like little text games in the like very basic programming language on there. I
Oh,
think that's
wow.
probably the earliest memory I have. Um, but then I in like college I started studying like literary art in like a digitally mediated kind of way. So like stories
Mhm.
told through some kind of interactive media. Um,
That's funny. I'm starting to code this year as well in the digital media art program. So it's kind
oh,
of
cool.
similar. Yeah. So prior to founding New Art City, what is your experience working with Web 3D?
By Web 3D, you're talking about just anything 3D on the web. Is that right?
Um, yes, yes. So like 3D art or digital art or
Okay, yeah.
yeah.
Before New Art City, most of my experience was in 2D and working with text and storytelling in that way. And in 3D, I I had a lot of experience with data visualization, and
Ah,
occasionally people I would dip into 3D there, although it's kind of it's like a lot harder actually to communicate simple things in 3D sometimes. Like
mhm.
oftentimes like a sketch is a lot easier. But a lot of I guess a lot of my interactions with 3D was in playing video games, like playing World of Warcraft. I played a lot of World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
I play a lot of video games too, so I know what you're talking about. All right.
and Counter-Strike,
Oh,
and
you play Counter-Strike?
I used to, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, going to LAN parties for
That's a
sure.
good one.
I don't know if people do that anymore, where you like,
There's like
people would come to
yeah,
your house with like a whole desktop
yeah.
machine and plug into a, yeah.
They do it now where you have to pay to go to like a place that has a bunch of PCs lined up to play. So,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
all right. New Art City was developed during the early days of the COVID lockdown. What was your outlook on existing virtual exhibition spaces at that time, and how does it differ from New Art City today?
So when we started New Art City, Don was in grad school, and he was thinking about like how are any of these grad students, I think himself included, going to have a degree show when no one can be in like physical proximity with one another.
Mhm.
It was right at the beginning of the pandemic. Um, and he showed me this like prototype he had made where you could just like upload some images and maybe even I think videos at that point and position them in space. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. I want to work on this. Um, at the time, there wasn't a lot. I mean, people weren't really talking about it that much. Um, but there was a long history of things like Second Life, massively multiplayer online games, all kinds of like multi-user dungeons, all kinds of like experiments with art in 3D. It seems like there's always been some kind of like subculture around um, online 3D digital art, and then it has
Yeah.
these like waves, and And I guess COVID was like something that maybe brought us into another one. But this one seems to be lasting at least a little bit longer. Maybe
Yeah.
because maybe because technology today is like uh, just like more able to handle it. Like I think those early experiments, you had to have some unusually good machines to do some of that. Although I even think I remember as a kid going to like some kind of an arcade or like I don't know, a theme park, and even
Mhm.
then you would like put these big goggles on, although they were like connected to the ceiling in some way. And I remember just being terrified actually. Like I was playing some game and like a dog, some kind of like, zombie dog would like
Yeah.
come to attack you and you were holding like a lightsaber controller. And I remember like trying to push the like zombie dog away with the lightsaber, but of course you can't because it's all virtual. So I didn't like that experience at all, actually.
Wo- Would you say that your interest in, on like you were talking about online multiplayer or massive online multiplayer, did that spark any interest?
My connection got kind of crappy, but you were asking whether
Oh,
the online multiplayer game sparked any interest in what I'm doing now.
yeah, because like those you have the shared interests of the digital media and the 3D art. It's not like one of the professional questions, but that just
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
that segued nicely.
definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, I guess what I loved about online multiplayer game experiences was like the thrill of playing with people from you had no idea where they were necessarily. They might come from a totally different culture,
Yeah,
and yet you still get to like interact with the same media or maybe even like play the same game together.
like share it. Yeah,
Um, yeah. Um, yeah, so I'd like to get to a point in New York City where that same excitement exists in terms of what you can do when you meet other people in like an art world, I guess.
yeah. All right. Before working on New Art City, what other Web 3D platforms or previous iterations of Web 3D were you looking at? How did other Web 3D iterations influence design decisions you made for New Art City?
I remember one software I really enjoyed. It was also a new software at the time that I really enjoyed was a VR one. I think it was Alt Space or something. And what was really fun about that was you could like get into sort of just like a blank, empty world with a
Mhm.
couple of friends, and you could all like go through this like library of models and then like build a space together.
Oh,
And that was just like a way of hanging out that
yeah.
I did like every week for a while. And then at the end, you'd like look at what everyone did, and it was often like really surreal and really goofy. Like we made like a giant plant. It was called Club Plant, and it was like a plant that you could climb up. And then at the top, there was like club, and there were like big palm trees, but then there were just like lions on the tops of the palm trees, stuff like that. Um, so I guess it was inspiring to be able to have, because usually like if you want to do something, if you want to like make space with someone, you have to like pay a lot for that. Like physical space is quite expensive in a lot of
Yeah.
places. So it was really exciting to have so much space that you could decorate however you want with whoever you wanted. And I think this was probably one of the things that was exciting about like even Second Life or all of these virtual space
What
experiences.
was that virtual space you were talking about? Is that something that's recent or is that kind of older technology compared to today? Like,
That
can I play that?
I think so. Yeah, I haven't done it in a while, but it's quite recent. It's like it came up with like the VR craze. So I think it's on like Oculus probably, Alt Space. Yeah.
Old space, I'll look into it. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Besides expanding accessibility, what are the benefits of an entirely virtual art gallery? And then a sub question of that is how do the experience of a virtual gallery differ from the experiences of an in-person exhibit?
I think digital art and virtual art is kind of a weird art form compared to I don't know, more classic art forms, because like with like painting or sculpture, you like make a physical object and then it like lives somewhere in the real world, and then you like go and visit it in
Yeah.
person and you can like walk around it. um but it gets like really tied, it's much more tied to place, whether it's like the current gallery or museum where it is, or the person's home where you find it, or if it's on the street somewhere, it's like much more tied to space. And then the way that you interact with it is by like interacting with the space. You
Mhm.
don't really interact with like the thing that much. Usually you like walk around it and see it from different perspectives. And then with digital art, it's like you load it wherever you happen to have your device, like
Yeah.
whether that's your room or a school computer or a computer in a gallery. So, and then it usually like loads on like a little rectangle in the room. Um, so in some ways, it's actually really limited
Yeah.
compared to classic art, because you don't have control over like anything in the surrounding environment. Sometimes when we like are sort of like coaching people who are making virtual exhibits for the first time, I definitely like try to remind them that like one of the main ways you can influence the environment is with sound, because if you play sound from like the space, suddenly like you've filled wherever the room is that they happen to be, you've like totally changed that. Whereas like anything visual you're
Yeah.
doing is going to be confined to just like this small rectangle in like whatever room they're in, probably, unless they happen to be projecting it or something. How like expansive and open digital art is, and it is in a lot of ways, but then in some ways it's actually like really limited and it's like a difficult constraint to work with, I think.
Yeah.
But then the ways it's expansive are like, yeah, in that little rectangle it's really dynamic and you can do all kinds of strange things, and it can change in so many ways and react to your decisions in so many ways that like a painting or a sculpture
For sure.
can't really, is more static, I guess.
How does New Art City situate itself in relation to the term metaverse? Sorry about that.
um Well, I guess like metaverse has become kind of a buzzword, which to me means, it kind of means that it's like lost a lot of its meaning, I guess. It's become like a marketing term that is just sort of like there for flair as opposed to for any kind of like specific semantic content or something.
Yeah.
Um so I don't really think about, I'm never thinking about metaverses when I think about New Art City, but I guess I am sometimes thinking about like um interconnected virtual spaces, I guess, that you might move between, or I'm thinking more about like what is this new medium than I am thinking about what is a metaverse. So I'm thinking about like what kinds of like interactions can exist today in a virtual space that will produce new kinds of meaning that we haven't seen before, I guess, and maybe will teach us more about ourselves. Yeah.
Kind of like hoping that metaverse has improved interactivity. Is that kind of what you're thinking, or you hope?
I'm curious. I'm still curious. I mean, it's been years, like decades. I guess it's been decades of like experimentation with virtual worlds, and there still is a sense of excitement about them and possibility. Because I think,
Mhm.
I mean, and I think others are still curious, like what can happen here. It seems like there's still a lot of unexplored corners and spaces in terms of like ways of existing in virtual space.
Yeah. All right. If there's if there is an exhibit on New Art City that stands out. Oh, sorry. Is there an exhibit on New Art City that stands out to you? Why is that exhibit so memorable for you?
So yeah, so Peter Basmillard's looking out, looking over was an interview project with Peter's mom. And that was one reason it stood out to me, was because you walk in this very like artificial space, and then you see these very like intimate personal interviews all with the same person. And the videos of her are placed, the spaces that Peter made are like composed of images made of like Google Maps screenshots and various other photographs. And then Peter like recreated sort of like architectures out of these photographs in a very minimal but effective way. Um, and this was in the early days of New Art City, so there wasn't really that much you could do with yeah what we had made, but they made this very like compelling and touching and important like documentary experience. Yeah.
That's great. And yeah, that actually brings me to another tangential question. As someone, who has also created on New Art City earlier in its process, is there anything that you think kind of typifies or is a hallmark of how the platform has changed, especially as like the creator side has improved and gotten more accessible, right? So is there like any way that people are creating now, or any thing that's happening now that like didn't happen in the early days, or ways that the style of rooms or spaces has changed overall based, do you think, on the the user interface side for the different creators?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, every time we add a new like feature about that, add a new feature that gives a new way to like express yourself or change the space, um, people like immediately use it in all kinds of creative ways. So at that point in time, we didn't have any kind of like object behaviors. So unless you were already familiar with Blender, you couldn't do any kind of animation at all with your objects. And now it's like quite simple to do some very basic animations, or like to make things appear when you get close to them. And pretty much as soon as we released that, people started like using it to change their spaces and decorate their spaces. And then we also added text. So again, like you could use text before if you were familiar with how to do it in Blender and then import it. And now you can like natively add text and stories and things like that to spaces. A lot of what we've been working on recently has been, which is kind of like the thing that we all want to work on the most usually, is these like we call them like we call the category expressivity, and it's like features for like making the worlds. But sort of the vegetable, Don likes to call them the vegetables. It's like the stuff we have to do is like making everything kind of like stable and just good. So like one thing I was working on recently was just making videos stream better, which is like quite boring because it's not like it's not really a new medium at all, but it's really important. Yeah, so we have to do some of the vegetables too.
The next question, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but what new features are you working on right now? I assume that relates to New Art City.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and I thought of one other thing about like features that give New Art City its specific style. Is one of the first features I think Dawn made was the ability to, when you upload an image, you can just render it as like a panel, or you can just, with a drop down, render it as like a box or a sphere. And so if you ever see like a virtual world that has these like boxes textured with images, or like many spheres with like these image textures on them, you can almost be sure it's like a New Art City world, because it's so much easier to do that in New Art City than in many other virtual space editors. Yeah, and that's like a really, I think it's really cool and amazing how like well, one thing I like about working with Don is he's he just like has a mind for that. Like he's always thinking about, I don't know, I don't really have the words to describe it, I guess. It's like things you wouldn't really think of as being like powerful or expressive, but then you realize they are because they're like so easy to use and fun to play with, I guess. Yeah, one new feature I'm really excited about is the project export feature. So this is like the ability to export everything you've made on New Art City as a zip file of like static assets that can be hosted on your own website somewhere or archived in a library or an archive or a museum or something. So it's a way to like get your work out of New Art City, and then you have like a thing that will last forever, or as long as like computers exist, essentially. And I'm really excited about this because I think this should just be a standard, like
Yeah.
not like a web standard, but like it should be standard that when you like make a thing using an online service, you can like get the stuff out of it that you made. Like I think it's ridiculous that there are like places where you can like put all your time and energy and like make some beautiful personal expression, and then it's like if you stop paying them a monthly fee, it's just like gone. Or if like the company just disappears, suddenly what you did is gone. It's like ridiculous. So I'm excited about this, both for what it will mean to like people creating stuff and the fact that like now everything will really be easily archivable and for a very long time. Like it'll be much easier to archive uh, digital artwork made on New Art City than in many other places. Um, and just sort of like politically, I think it's like the way things should be.
All right. What can viewers expect of New Art City's development within the next 5 years?
Oh, damn. Um, I think people can expect a lot of like exciting new ways to tell stories virtually and ways of like structuring the worlds that you're making into stories, I guess, for the viewer. And this is part of this is about making these experiences more accessible to people that maybe are not as familiar with how to navigate, like maybe they've never played a video game or something. And then a lot of other accessibility features too. Like I think in the next 5 years, you're going to start seeing a lot of exhibits that can be experienced purely in audio. So maybe if you can't see, there's going to be all of this content, all of this artwork for you to experience purely in audio. And a lot more presentations by artists working in New Art City and documentation of their process and what it's like to be working in this medium.
All right, here we go. Given your experience with influencing the current art world and digital mediums, what is your vision for the future regarding emerging artist roles and impact for the next generation?
I think it would be great if people who are curious about it have a path to learn about how their technology works, like learn about how programming works, and a path to like sharing their experiences of the world today with each other in like a way that feels like true and meaningful to themselves, I guess. And I hope that like it just becomes I hope we end up in a world where it becomes like standard to share what makes your experience of the world unique and different with like the people that you encounter.
So before I pause the recording, I just want to say thank you, Benny, for taking the time. This has been really enjoyable for me to
Yeah.
hear your perspective and to hear about what's coming down the pipeline a little bit for New Art City.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time to ask me questions.
Thank you so much also. It was a pleasure interviewing you and listening. That was awesome.